My son and his wife told me, return the $50,000 or stay away, so I gave them a reason to mean it. The phone call came on a Thursday. I remember because the kettle had just started to scream, and the sound of my son's voice cut sharper than the steam that hissed from the spout. "Mom," he said, without a hello, "you either return the $50,000 or you don't come back into our lives again." I didn't say a word. Not at first. I stood there, tea bag trembling between my fingers, heart stilled by the coldness in his tone. $50,000. A number that used to mean nothing when it was his college tuition or the down payment for their house. Now it was a wall. Cold. Impenetrable. It wasn't just a demand. It was exile. I suppose I should start at the beginning. Though beginnings are blurry things when you're in your 70s and memories don't always arrive in order. But I remember love. I remember my son, Jake, the day he was born red-faced, screaming, clutching my pinky finger as if it were a lifeline. And for years it was. I was a single mother. His father left when Jake was still in diapers, choosing a woman half my age and a life twice removed from responsibility. So I gave Jake everything: time, money, my youth. My dreams became his. My sacrifices were silent, but endless. When Jake met Melanie, I was thrilled. She was poised, polished, the kind of woman who always had a perfect manicure and a plan. At first, she treated me with cautious courtesy. I baked, babysat, paid for dinners they couldn't afford. I gave when they didn't ask because that's what mothers do. We give until there's nothing left. Then came the request. Jake had just been laid off. Melanie was pregnant with their second child. They needed help. Just until we're back on our feet, he promised. So I dipped into the last of my savings, the fund I had quietly built for emergencies, for aging, maybe even for a vacation I never took. $50,000. Wired. No contract. Just trust. And then, silence. Weeks turned to months. Calls went unanswered. Visits felt tense, rehearsed. Melanie began managing the interaction: short texts, clipped emails, polite but distant. Jake's eyes changed. They avoided mine. His hugs grew brief, impersonal. I told myself I was imagining it. That stress was making them distant. That love doesn't vanish, it just hides. But then came that Thursday. Return the 50 grand, he said, like I had stolen it. You didn't give it. You never said it was a gift. Jake, I finally said, voice quivering. You asked me for help. I asked for a loan, he snapped. After everything I've done for you. I whispered. Mom, this isn't personal. It's financial. And just like that, the call ended. Not personal. It was the final insult dismissing decades of devotion with a line straight out of a bank notice. I sat on the couch for hours after, the tea long cold. I didn't cry. Not then. Anger has a way of damming up the tears. But somewhere between rage and heartbreak, a seed was planted. If they wanted me gone unless I returned the money, then maybe they needed a reason to mean it. I didn't have $50,000 to return, but I had something far more valuable: truth. A truth they buried, one they thought I'd never dig up again. But time, solitude, and a mother's grief make excellent archaeologists. The next morning, I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. It smelled like lavender and loss. Inside were the letters. Not emails. Not texts. Letters. Ink on paper, folded with care. Some from Jake's father. Others from someone else. Someone I hadn't thought about in decades. Someone I had loved before life turned practical. And then, I found it: Jake's birth certificate. The real one. The one with a different last name, scribbled and crossed out in a desperate hospital correction that no one ever questioned. Except me. I knew what I had done. I knew why. Jake was not only mine. He had another father, a man who never knew. A man still alive. And a man who, judging by what I saw on Google that evening, had become very, very wealthy. For 47 years, I kept that secret out of shame. I had been young. It had been messy. He had moved on. I raised Jake alone, and I never looked back. But now, with nothing to lose and a heart cracked open like glass, I wrote a letter. Not to Jake. Not to Melanie. To the man who once held my face in his hands and whispered, "You'll change my life." He just never knew how right he was. The letter was mailed on Monday. By Wednesday, I received a call. "Is this Eleanor Marks?" a deep voice asked. "Yes. My name is Thomas Reeves. You sent me a letter." I held my breath. "Is it true?" he asked. No anger. Just gravity. "Yes," I said. "I wouldn't reach out unless I was sure." He exhaled. "I have no words." I'm not asking for anything, I said quickly. I only reached out because he thinks I owe him money. I thought you had a right to know you have a son. Silence. Can I meet him? Thomas asked. I closed my eyes. He doesn't know yet. Then maybe it's time, he said. Maybe it's time we both come out of the shadows. By the following week, I made a decision. One last act as a mother. Not to beg, not to explain, but to reveal. Jake and Melanie invited me for a discussion, probably hoping I would agree to some kind of payment plan or admit guilt. I arrived early, alone, with a man standing quietly behind me. When Jake opened the door, his eyes flickered. Mom. Jake, I said softly. This is Thomas. Thomas stepped forward. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of presence that commands attention without saying a word. Jake looked confused. Who? Your father, I said. Your real father. The room froze. Melanie's mouth dropped open. Jake took a step back. That's not possible, he stammered. It is, I said, pulling the envelope from my bag. Birth certificate. DNA test I had arranged. Photographs. Letters. I raised you, I said. Loved you. Gave you everything. But this manha never had a chance to know you. And now maybe he can help you in a way I never could. What does this have to do with the money? Melanie asked, eyes narrowing. Thomas finally spoke. It has everything to do with it. Because you demanded repayment. And your right debts should be honored. So I've decided to give Eleanor a gift. A repayment for the life she lived without me. $50,000. Today. He pulled out a check. Jake's face flushed red. Melanie looked as if she'd seen a ghost. Thomas turned to me. And from now on, Eleanor, you owe them nothing. I nodded, eyes brimming. Jake tried to speak, but I raised a hand. You told me to return the $50,000 or stay away, I said. Now you have it. And I will stay away. Jake didn't say a word as I walked out the door that day. He just stood there, shoulders rigid, staring at the check in his hand as if it were a grenade with the pin already pulled. I didn't expect an apology. I didn't even expect regret. But as I stepped off their porch, I heard the faintest crack in his voice. Mom, wait. I paused, back still turned. I didn't know, he said. About him. I didn't turn around. You never asked. And with that, I walked away. The air outside was cool, the kind that whispers autumn is coming. Thomas waited by the car, his face unreadable. Are you all right? He asked. I nodded, though everything inside me felt like broken glass barely held together. It's done. Thomas looked at me with something like awe. You're the strongest person I've ever met. I let out a laugh, dry and brittle. Strength isn't a gift, Thomas. It's what's left when everything else has been taken. We drove in silence for a while. The roads felt familiar but hollow, like walking through an abandoned house filled with echoes of laughter that no longer existed. I want to get to know him, Thomas said finally. You should try, I said. He's stubborn, like me, but there's a good heart under the mess. If Melanie hasn't choked it out. Thomas didn't smile. He was too thoughtful for that. Do you think he'll want to know me? I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm not his gatekeeper anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. My tiny home, once a sanctuary, felt like a cage. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the chipped tile countertop and wondering where it all went wrong. When did love become something that could be itemized? When did my son learn to weigh me in dollars? The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote in my journal. The leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed. But the act of writing, the motion, the silence made me feel something close to whole. I wrote about being a mother. About the nights I rocked Jake through fevers and night terrors. About Melanie's polite contempt, her calculated rise through Jake's life. About the moment I realized I had handed them my future like a wrapped gift only to be told it was never theirs to open. And I wrote about Thomas. How his eyes hadn't changed in 50 years. How he held the truth like a sacred thing, not a weapon. How, even now, he treated me with the kind of respect that makes a woman feel like she exists. A few days passed, then a week. Jake didn't call, but Thomas did. Lunch, he asked. I hesitated. You sure you're not just feeling guilty for missing 47 birthdays? He laughed. I'm hoping to make up for them one meal at a time. We met at a small diner by the lake. The kind with cracked vinyl booths and waitresses who call you honey without looking up. We talked about everything but Jake. About music. About books. About the things we lost and the ones we never dared to want. At one point, he reached across the table and touched my hand. Not romantically, just present. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. You carried so much. Alone. I blinked away tears I hadn't prepared for. That was the job. It shouldn't have been. The following week, Jake showed up at my doorstep. He looked older. Not in years, but in wear. His eyes were dark-ringed, his posture hunched like someone carrying the weight of too many bad decisions. Can I come in?" he asked. I opened the door. He stepped inside, looking around as if the house was unfamiliar. In many ways, it probably was. He hadn't visited in months. Maybe longer. "I don't want the money," he said, sitting down awkwardly on the couch. "You have it," I replied. "No," he shook his head. "Not like that. Not from him. That wasn't what I meant when I asked." I raised an eyebrow. "Then what did you mean?" Jake looked down, running a hand through his hair. "I meant I was scared. We're struggling. Melanie's been pressuring me to clean up our finances. She said we needed to draw lines. Treat it like business. But Mom, I never wanted to treat you like a transaction." "You did." "I know," he whispered. "And I hate myself for it." I said nothing. Let the silence wrap around us like fog. "I was wrong," he said. "About so much. About you. About what you gave me." I looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't a boy anymore. He wasn't even the man I raised. He was something in between broken, but breaking open. "Do you want to know him?" I asked. Jake hesitated. "Thomas." I nodded. He looked at the floor. "I don't know. I feel cheated. Like my whole life has a chapter missing." I reached over, gently touching his knee. "So read it. Fill in the pages. You can't change what's already written, but you don't have to let someone else hold the pen." He looked at me, eyes full of water he refused to let fall. "Can I come back?" "Not the way it was," I said, "but maybe the way it could be." Over the next few weeks, something strange and beautiful began to happen. Jake started calling again. Small things, at first. Questions about recipes. A quick update on the kids. An apology tucked into every conversation like a folded note he was too scared to open fully. Thomas was patient. He didn't force anything. But he sent Jake a letter hinting him about the kind of man he was. The kind of man he hoped Jake could become. Melanie remained distant. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. That was hers to carry. But Jake started showing up. He visited more. Alone at first, then with the kids. They were shy, curious. I showed them old photos, Jake in Halloween costumes, Jake with finger paint on the fridge, Jake falling asleep on my chest. One afternoon, while the kids played in the yard, Jake turned to me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I took a long breath. "Because I was afraid you'd hate me." "I don't," he said. "I hate that you had to choose." "I didn't choose," I said. "Life chose. I just survived." The healing wasn't fast or easy, but it was real. Thomas and Jake met for coffee. Then again, and again, they started talking about business, about the past, about the way men struggle to say, "I missed you," even when they never knew they should. Melanie kept her distance, but eventually allowed the kids to visit me on weekends. They laughed in my garden, painted rocks, ate too much pie. And one day, when I least expected it, a card arrived in the mail. No return address, just a name in careful script, Melanie. Inside, a single line. "Thank you for raising him the way you did. I see it now." Now, every Sunday, we have dinner. Jake brings the kids. Thomas brings dessert. I bring peace. We don't talk about the money, or the ultimatum, or the day I walked away. We talk about today, the messy, beautiful, fragile present. And sometimes, when the kids are in bed and the dishes are done, Jake will sit beside me on the porch and say nothing at all. Just sit. Like he used to when he was a boy and the world was safe. Fall was rolling in fast. The leaves had turned a fiery gold, scattered like memories across the ground. I found myself lingering in the garden more these days. It felt like the only place where time softened, where the noise of all the things that had been said and unsaid faded. Thomas had started coming by often, not just to see me, but to help, fixing the back fence, cleaning the gutters. He even built a little bench near the old tree swing where Jake used to spend hours as a boy. He didn't say it, but I knew why. He was making space for roots that had once been cut. Jake noticed. At first, I thought the presence of Thomas might create tension. But Jake surprised me. One afternoon, he came by with a basket of apples the kids had picked. Thomas was already there, repairing a loose step on the porch. "Hey," Jake said, almost awkwardly. Thomas looked up. "Hey, yourself." They stood there for a long moment. And then, In a gesture so subtle I nearly missed it, Jake handed Thomas a wrench. No big speech. No grand apology. Just the beginning of something that didn't need words. That night, after the kids had gone home and the house was quiet again, I stood at the sink, rinsing the last of the pie plates. Thomas walked up behind me and rested his hand gently on my shoulder. "You did that," he said. "No," I replied. "They did that." But the truth was, we both knew it took someone lighting the match to start the fire. I didn't need credit. What I needed was this peace. This small, hard-won piece of normal. And yet, peace doesn't always last. 2 weeks later, Melanie showed up. She didn't call, didn't text, just appeared on my porch like a storm cloud dressed in linen and pearls. I opened the door and felt my stomach turn. "Can we talk?" she asked, arms crossed. I stepped aside. She walked in, looking around as if cataloging everything she might use later as evidence. "I'm not here to argue," she said, sitting stiffly in the armchair. "But I need you to understand something." I stayed silent. She continued. "I didn't marry Jake for his money. I didn't push him to demand that check because I hate you. I pushed him because we were drowning." I raised an eyebrow. "You seemed fine from where I stood." "We were behind on the mortgage. Medical bills. 2 of the kids need speech therapy, and our insurance barely covers it." "You could have asked," I said simply. She scoffed. "We did ask. That's what the ultimatum was." "No," I said. "You threatened." Melanie's jaw clenched. But then something in her shifted. Her shoulders sagged just slightly. "I was scared," she whispered. "I grew up poor, watching my mom work 3 jobs and still cry herself to sleep because we couldn't afford heat. I swore that wouldn't be my life." "So you made me the villain," I said. She didn't deny it. "I thought you were holding back," she said. "That you had money tucked away, hoarding it out of pride." I didn't realize it was him. Her voice softened on the last word. Him, as if even saying Thomas's name tasted unfamiliar. "You didn't ask," I said again. She nodded. Slowly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just context." I looked at her, really looked. For the first time in years, I saw not the manipulator, the gatekeeper, the wedge between me and my son, but a woman. Tired. Scared. Fighting battles I couldn't see. "Context," I said, "is a good place to start." After that visit, things changed again. Melanie didn't warm up overnight, but she started sending polite texts. "The kids love the cookies, thank you." Or, "Do you have that chili recipe Jake mentioned?" I sent back one-word replies at first, then sentences. Then, eventually, a picture of Jake when he was 3, asleep in a cardboard box he insisted was a spaceship. She sent back a laughing emoji. Small cracks in thick walls. One evening, Jake came over alone. He sat on the porch swing, watching the sun slide down behind the trees. "She told me she talked to you," he said. I nodded. "She cried afterward," he added. "Said she finally saw the whole picture." "She was brave," I said. "Takes guts to own the damage you've caused." He smiled a little. "You'd know." We sat in silence for a while. "I want him to be a part of our lives," Jake said suddenly. I turned toward him. "Thomas." He nodded. "The kids ask about him. About the man who helped build the birdhouse." I felt something catch in my throat. "And I think," Jake continued, "he deserves to see who I became." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "Then show him." So we planned something we hadn't done in over a decade. A family dinner. All of us. Melanie brought wine. Jake grilled steaks. The kids played in the yard with Thomas, who showed them how to whistle with a blade of grass. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. But it was real. Messy, honest, raw. At one point, Melanie stood and tapped her glass. "I just want to say thank you," she said. "To all of you. For not giving up on each other." She turned to me. "Especially you." I smiled gently. No grand response. No rehearsed words. Just grace. Later that night, after everyone left and I was once again in the quiet of my home, I looked around. I saw the empty wine glasses, the crumbs from laughter-soaked desserts, the faint echo of forgiveness in the air. I had no more money to give, but I had given something greater. Truth. Time. A second chance. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone trying to earn a seat at the table. I felt like the one who built it. 2 days after the family dinner, I got a letter in the mail. Real paper. A real envelope. My name written in Jake's messy, boyish handwriting. Inside was a folded sheet, not typed. Just pen and ink. Like he had sat down at the kitchen table the way I used to sit at mine when he was small. Mom, I've been thinking a lot lately about what it means to be a father, a husband, a son. I used to think being a provider meant having all the answers, that money could fix things, that if I controlled the budget, I could protect everyone I loved. But you didn't raise me to be a provider. You raised me to be present. You raised me to tell the truth, even when it hurt. You raised me to look people in the eye and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I let someone else's fear become my voice. I let Melanie's desperation speak louder than your history with me. When I asked you to return the $50,000 or stay away, I wasn't asking you, I was blaming you. I was punishing you for not being the person I needed, when I didn't even realize I was becoming someone you couldn't recognize. I think about Dad sometimes. I barely remember him, but I remember the silence he left behind. How you used to sit at the kitchen table after work with your head in your hands. I thought you were tired. But now I know you were holding everything together with nothing but willpower and coffee. You were stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I hope it's not too late to learn from you now. Love, Jake. I folded the letter slowly, tears slipping down my cheeks, warm and quiet. They weren't tears of sadness this time. They were soft, healing. That night, I called Thomas. He answered on the second ring. Everything all right? I got a letter from Jake. He paused. And I think we're getting there. In the weeks that followed, the shift became permanent. Jake and Thomas started working on a small project together, building a shed behind my house. They said it was for storage, but I think they just needed a reason to spend time without expectations. I'd bring them lemonade or coffee and sit nearby, pretending to read while listening to their conversations. At first, they were stiff and careful, but then the rhythm picked up. Stories from Thomas's younger days. Questions from Jake about how to raise boys, how to stay married when things got hard. It wasn't effortless, but it was real. Melanie came by more, too. She brought the kids with her and didn't hover over them like she used to. Once, while we were watching the kids play in the yard, she turned to me and said, "You know, I used to envy you." I blinked, surprised. "What on earth for?" "You're calm," she said. "Even when you're angry, you never lose control." I thought it meant you didn't care. Now I see it was strength. I didn't know what to say, so I said the only thing that felt true. I was scared all the time. I just didn't show it. Melanie smiled. "I see that now." There was no dramatic embrace, no teary reconciliation, just respect, the kind that grows slowly, like roots underground. One afternoon, as autumn began to give way to winter, Jake sat next to me on the front porch. "I want to pay you back," he said. I shook my head. "I don't need money, Jake." "No," he said. "Not for the check. For the years." I turned to him, caught off guard. "I took from you," he continued. "Time. Trust. Pieces of you I didn't even realize were still holding me up." "You don't owe me anything," I said. "You're my son." He smiled, soft and sad. "I know, but I want to give back anyway. I want to build something for you. With you." I looked at him for a long moment. "What did you have in mind?" He grinned. "Remember that bakery you used to dream about?" My chest tightened. "I haven't thought about that in years." "Well," Jake said, "Thomas and I talked. We found a spot downtown. It's small, needs a lot of work, but it's got charm, and a perfect view of the sunrise." I stared at him. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," he said. "We'll handle the renovations. You handle the recipes." I laughed. "You've never seen me bake under pressure. I've never seen you fail." The bakery became our second chance. We called it Second Rise, a nod to both bread and beginnings. The opening day was small family, friends, a few curious neighbors. I stood behind the counter with flour on my apron and tears in my eyes as my granddaughter handed me a spatula and said, "You look like magic." And maybe, for the first time in a long time, I felt like it. Jake worked weekends. Melanie handled the books. Thomas built the shelves by hand. We weren't perfect, but we were whole in a way that had never existed before. Not because we forgot the pain, but because we let it teach us how to begin again. Winter settled over our town like a thick, quiet blanket. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the window of Second Rise, melting against the warm panes as the scent of cinnamon and butter filled the air. I was rolling dough when Jake walked in, still dusted with sawdust from a shelving project he and Thomas had been finishing in the back. "You know," he said, pulling off his gloves and rubbing his hands together, "when I imagined what this place might look like, I didn't expect it to feel so lived in." "It's not the walls that do that," I said without looking up. It's the people inside them. Jake leaned against the counter. Melanie says you're good for the neighborhood. She told the PDA that this place is like therapy wrapped in carbs. I laughed. She's not wrong. People come in for cookies, but they leave a little lighter. He nodded, watching me knead. You make it look easy. It's never been easy, I said. Not the baking. Not the forgiving. Not the surviving. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, do you ever think about what would have happened if we never asked for the money? If we just let things stay peaceful? I paused my kneading. You mean if you hadn't drawn that line? He nodded. I do think about it, I said. But I don't regret what happened. Because sometimes, Jake, peace is just silence in disguise. What we have now. This isn't peace because no one's angry. This is peace because we walked through fire and came out the other side. Jake looked at me, and I saw a boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street. The man who once shut me out. And the father who now understood both. I'm glad you didn't return that check, he said. So am I. The bakery became a rhythm. Thomas stopped by every morning at 6 sharp to make coffee and fix things that didn't need fixing. Melanie came in twice a week to help with inventory and, I suspected, to make sure I wasn't overworking myself. The grandkids would visit after school, dropping their backpacks by the coat hooks and heading straight for the back table, where I kept extra dough for them to shape into whatever their imaginations conjured. Customers came and went, most unaware of the long, tangled story behind the counter. One older gentleman, a regular named Mr. Keegan, said to me one morning, "This place smells like the kind of home I never had." I smiled. That's the best compliment we've ever gotten. Spring brought with it something unexpected. Thomas had been acting different. Slower. Tired. I noticed he sat more than he used to and winced when he thought no one was looking. One morning, I cornered him behind the counter, my hand on his elbow. "What is it?" I asked. He looked at me, a shadow in his eyes. "Doctor says it's my heart. Not failing, but not strong either. I need to slow down." I felt the breath catch in my chest. "Have you told Jake?" He shook his head. "Not yet. I didn't want to worry anyone." "You think hiding something like this makes it easier?" "I think hiding it gives me time to figure out how to say it." I put my hand over his. "Let me help you figure it out." The next Sunday, we all gathered at my house. The kids played in the backyard, and I made too much pasta. It felt familiar. Safe. When dinner was nearly over, Thomas cleared his throat. "I need to tell you all something," he began. Everyone grew quiet. "I've had some tests done," he said slowly. "The kind that come with words no one wants to hear. I'm not dying today or tomorrow, but I've got to take better care of myself if I want to be around longer." There was silence. Jake looked at him, then at me. Melanie covered her mouth with her hand. "But you're okay," Jake said. "For now," Thomas replied. "But I can't keep pushing like I used to. Which means I might not always be at the bakery, or here, or everywhere I want to be." He looked directly at Jake. "But I want you to know, I'm proud of you. Of what you built. Of the man you've become." Jake's eyes glistened. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "Not without a fight." Thomas chuckled. "I don't plan to." After that night, something shifted again. Jake stepped up at the bakery even more, taking on morning shifts so Thomas could rest. Melanie organized a rotation of volunteers, neighbors, friends, even customers who had fallen in love with the place. People showed up, not just for the pastries, but for us. The little bakery on the corner had become a lifeline for more than just our family. We started hosting story nights, where older folks shared memories and kids read poems they'd written. One evening, a woman who had just lost her husband stood with tears in her eyes and said, "This place makes me believe in second chances." Jake whispered to me, "You gave us one." I whispered back, "We gave each other one." 6 months later, the town paper ran a feature about Second Rise. The headline read, "One Woman's Recipe for Redemption. How a Loaf of Bread Rebuilt a Broken Family." I framed it and hung it near the register. But what they didn't print, what I wish I could tell every person who walks in, is this. Forgiveness isn't a clean slice. It's messy, like dough that sticks to your fingers, stubborn and slow. But when you keep working it, shaping it, letting it rise, it becomes something beautiful. It feeds more than just the stomach. It feeds the soul. One evening, just before closing, Jake stood beside me at the register. The shop was quiet. Outside, the lights from the street lamps flickered like memories. "I never said thank you," he murmured. I turned to him. "For what?" "For not giving up on me." I reached out and squeezed his hand. You gave me a reason not to. He looked down. I want to start something. A small fund. For families like us. Ones who hit hard times. We'll call it the Second Rise Fund. My throat tightened. That's beautiful. He smiled. It's time we gave other people a chance to stand back up. In the end, I didn't return the $50,000. I returned the truth. I returned to the life I had almost lost. And more than anything, I returned to myself.